Oh, wow. Hey, much love, much love. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. How you guys doing? Pura vida? Pura vida. I hope you pura vida. Thanks for again tuning in. We're just gonna do well, we're gonna show a little presentation here, PowerPoint, and then we're gonna have a little bonus video at the end after that. We're gonna do a little side commentary, probably. It depends. But very interesting information that Mr. Jay Wakefield, the guy presenting this PowerPoint to an audience, is talking about and correlating with what we've already learned. And I mean, we just read it yesterday, right, about the Michigan copper and all that. And so I had this little presentation here already on my computer. So I'm like, let me just go present it now since we got the idea fresh and pretty interesting. He's literally saying, I think what he's saying, is interpret what I'm interpreting is that this is like Pottery Point was a place where they were like manufacturing the copper before it went out in exportation to the world so they can create their Bronze Age, you know. I mean, there's so much with Pottery Point. It's very ancient. It's in Louisiana. All right, so we'll go ahead and take a look at do a little recap at the end, a video I got on that. But we're gonna go ahead and you know, take a look at Mr. Jay Wakefield's presentation. Hey, thank you, Roger, for the donation. Thank you, Millennials. Appreciate it very much. Thank you for doing that. All right, let me just get this ready. Let me know if the music is ever louder than Mr. Jake Wakefield, talking. All right. Again, welcome. Okay. Yeah, okay. So I should be in the corner on the top right, hopefully. I'm not taking over the video. Just let me know if I am. All right. So we're gonna get started. Again, this is what it says here, Poverty Point, the mining and shipment of Michigan copper in the Bronze Age. A whole other person letting us know what we already know. This is what I'm trying to tell you guys, the purest copper in the world coming out of Lake Superior region. This is what they use for their so-called Bronze Age, believe it or not. And they never told us this in history. They never told us this in school. They don't want to literally say that because then that's going to make us think like, whoa, what do you mean you were getting it from the Americas? What do you mean you were getting all that copper from the Americas? This is presented by Jay Wakefield, Ancient American History Conference, Salt Lake City. This is from 2011. Okay. There we go.
This presentation is about an important site called Poverty Point in northeast Louisiana. It's amazing that most people haven't heard of it. It's carbon dated, as you'll see, from 2400 BC, officially down to 700, but I'll show you that it actually lasted longer than that. It was on the Copper Trail because it was on the Mississippi River. All the slides I'm going to show you, most all the slides I'm going to show you are in my book, Rocks and Rose, which I've got next. I got about 6 copies left on the table back there if you're interested. It's at www.rocksandrose.com, and you can contact me if you wish at comcast.net. All right, so let's get going. This is my work on Poverty Point is based a lot on these 2 works. The one on the right is easy to get. It's John Gibson's. His book, Ancient Mounds of Poverty Point, was the result of his lifetime work as the archaeologist of the site. On the left is a very hard to find book, out of print, I think, that includes the work of archaeologist Bruce Seth, Jim Seth, who is the archaeologist for the Texas Historical Commission. And I'm going to quote his work quite a bit later in the talk. All right, this orients where Poverty Point is for you. The white is Louisiana. So it's at the very northeast corner of the state here. Vicksburg's down here, so not too hard to get to. This is another map showing Poverty Point on Macon Ridge, a little high ground. The rest of this area is flat because the Mississippi River's meandered back and forth across it so many times in its history. So as you can see, if one were coming up in a boat, Poverty Point at one point was right alongside the Mississippi River. It no longer is. It's now fronted by this Bayou Macon, which was one time the river. There are so many of these bayous, as you probably know, along the Mississippi, that there's just a huge number of wildlife refuges and so on. They're cut off. They're no longer flowing, but they're old riverways. Now, because there are so many of those, this Poverty Point area is quite remarkable. No, we're going too fast here. There were up to 1 million pounds of fish per square mile in these bayous, and there were also many deer, nuts, and so on, so that a great population was able to be supported prior to agriculture. This is one of the few places in the world where large populations were easy to support. Other areas, as you know, were the mouth of the Colorado in the old days, the mouth of the rivers, Euphrates in the Middle East, and so on.
All right, so he's saying, this was an area in the world where there was so much abundance, when it comes to food, fish, planting and the fertile soil. So it was a place where you can develop a high civilization, a large population, all right? It's just saying right here, 30,000 to 1 million pounds of fish per square mile, rich with nuts, fruits, deer, and other animals. 100 surrounding support centers have been identified. Okay, it says archaic hunter-gatherers communities, no agriculture, towns, mounds, pottery, and agriculture appear in woodland cultures.
So now, Poverty Point is an archaic site. It's a hunter-gatherer community because it lived off this food. It was prior to agriculture. Now, technically, archaeology calls a woodland culture a culture that has agriculture, pottery, mounds, and towns, like Cahokia. And those come along about AD 0. But Poverty Point is far earlier than that. Poverty Point is truly archaic, so it's a problem to archaeology. Well, a little bit of a travelogue here. If you're coming from the east, you cross this river over the bayou, you turn right here up to the site. This is what it looks like if you go to visit the place. This is the sign on the outside. I'm sorry some of these are going to be a little light because they want all the light on me instead on, won't turn the lights down quite enough. But at any rate, that's the entry to Poverty Point site. It's a Louisiana state park. It's not a national park. This is the museum, the entry building to the site. This is for the archaeologists' residents. They've only excavated about 0.3% of the site, they say, although it was a farm for many years and was plowed, so there's been a lot of artifact collecting. This is a sign on the site, Ancient Mounds Trail of Poverty Point Earthworks, complex of mounds and semicircular ridges, most of them built around 1500 BC. They were the largest earthworks in the Western Hemisphere at the time. This is how the site was found in 1955. There was a farm, and it was found by this aerial photograph that these rings hadn't been erased by the plowing. Here's the Bayou Macon in front of the site, okay, and here's the road going across the site. The travel centers, the museum, tourist centers right here. This is Gibson's, the archaeologist's, drawing of those rings. That's better, thank you. We can see things a little more clearly now. This is a drawing by the archaeologist showing the erosion at the ends of these big roads. Now this is about like 3/4 of a mile across. This is a huge earthen mound of a bird here, which shows here on this one. All right, just to show you the carbon dates on the site, they've been carbon dating this a lot. I kind of think when people repeat things a lot, it's because they don't believe the results. It's just so archaic. Here's a site about 2300 BC. It could range between 2470 and 2040. So there's a great many carbon carbon datings on this site. It's well known what the age is, and it does go back to a founding at about 2400 BC. Now, from our previous work, we know that the Atlantic was crossed by people from Europe at about 2500. So this was found pretty early. Town was founded pretty early, as were the Olmecs in the other side of the Gulf of Mexico. All right, if you're a tourist there, you are encouraged to take this tour around through the ball court mound and the big bird mound and this other mound and back. And it's quite a little walk around to do that. Here's what it looks like on the site. It's been plowed so much they're not very high anymore. There's hearths in the dirt here. It's only got about a yard deep down to the bedrock, but there's one hearth for every compact car size. So there's there's a great number of hearths here that are buried. There's 11 miles of these artificial ridges. This is what it looks like in the woods a little bit. They're not plowed so much in some of the areas. And this is the causeway in between the ridges. These are what some of the mounds look like, big mounds. Ball court mound. This is looking down the ball court. Oh, that's looking down the ball court mound. It's a big square area. Off to the distance, off of the parkland, there are, this is the cotton being harvested. It's fantastic. It was blowing all over the place. They load these one truckload at a time. They're huge, huge trucks. Now this is what the bird mound used to look like. It's a little fuzzy here, but it gives a conception. This is what it's like to go up it today, up that staircase. This is looking down the staircase. This is up on top, looking at the end of the bird mound. You can see it. They call it bird mound because it had wings. It faces straight west. This is one of the other mounds. It's on a farm north. It's not on the park property. It's behind a guy's farmhouse. Okay, the dates are important here. I'm going to explain copper mining in Michigan, but it was mined by ancient miners. Copper in Michigan was mined between 2400 BC and ended at 1200 BC. 1200 BC is a critical date because that ended the Bronze Age in Europe. All the cities in the Mediterranean burned at 1200, and it's not officially known why. There's no weapons at the sites. The cities, I asked the whole faculty of the University of Washington at a cocktail party. We're standing around, and they agreed everything burned. I've got a textbook that shows all the cities in the Mediterranean that burned at 1200 BC. The mining ended at that age. Radiocarbon date, we know the mining ended then. So this is all prior to the end of the Bronze Age. This is the date of the Bronze Age, basically, when this mining occurred. Now, the mound building occurred before. The maximum mound building was rather late in the mining, but toward the end of the Bronze Age. The comet catastrophe, 1200. Mound building ceased about that time, and we know that they know from studying the Mississippi River that the river shifted its course at 1000 BC away from this site. So
you're saying how old it is, right? You know, according to their carbon dating and stuff, it could be a lot older. But again, they're saying the Mississippi River used to go right next to Pottery Point. We did learn yesterday that a lot of these so-called bayous are actually artificial canals. You guys remember? We read that yesterday. So that could have been an artificial canal that was going through there that they had, you know, so they can import and export or do trade or whatever, as we were reading yesterday.
A little after the catastrophe, the river left this site. You can see now the bayou is down steep. It was eating away from this site at some date because it's very steep on the water side of the site. The Arkansas River, which is just a little to the north, flooded this site at one time and left destroyed some of the earthworks, according to archaeologists in 1955. So there's some complexity in the eroding of the place, but we think it was round originally and the river eroded it away. Okay? Now there are a lot of round structures in the world in the Bronze Age. This is a later building, but the Portsmouth Group up in Ohio, and this is an Atlantis configuration. We'll get into that some more, but we believe that this site was originally a round structure. Now,
all right, so, you know, I'm gonna mention this again and also in my video, but, you know, they They say it was actually a whole round thing. Today you only see half of it. So it has been eroded or something happened with the river. That's what they're saying, but it seems to have been completely a round structure, circular structure. All right.
When we study the layout of these 6 mounds, there's 4 here and 2 there. They're in perfectly parallel north-south orientations to what's called Poverty Point North. And that's a complicated subject, but a couple of degrees off the true north. But when we look at this, it fits what we find in other megalithic sites. That is, that the latitude of this site is encoded in the site. The site latitude is, see if it's kind of hard, it's fuzzy to read. The site latitude is one of these latitudes in here. Here it is, site latitude 33 degrees. It's a line between the center of the circles, center of the rings, out is 33 degrees. That's where the site is located, 33 degrees north. Now, there's a lot of other angles in here that are important in the megalithic culture sailing. The angle between this mound and the center here gives us the latitude of the West Azores you had to find when you're sailing back to Europe at 39 degrees north. And below it is the latitude of Stonehenge in England at 51 degrees north. Between these 2 mounds, you get the angle of 47 degrees, which is the latitude of Cape Race, where you set sail for Europe to get to the West Azores at 47 degrees north. And this angle on the other side of it, the complementary angle, which is also used, is 43 degrees, which is the latitude of American Stonehenge, the biggest megalithic site in the United States. It used to be called Mystery Hill. It's up in southern New Hampshire. I could keep going here, but all through these angles between these mounds are angles that are very meaningful to a sailing culture. And we find that true in many megalithic sites. If you have our books, we go from site to site to site and show that this is true. We made one assumption that people could read the height of the sun and read the angle and read the latitude. When you go north, the sun gets lower, and you go south, it's higher at noon. And true enough, we're able to read these latitudes at all sorts of megalithic sites. So you can go a little further than that, because we have 6 rings and there's 10 segments. So if we tell you that this sign, there's so much encoded information here that this site was designed by the mind of man, not by accident. There are 6 ring segments, 6 rings and 10 segments. You multiply that, you get 60 degrees. And that is the critical 60 degree north, Cape Farvel, the point of southern Greenland where you had to sail by in order to reach North America on the northern sailing route. But if you multiply that by the 6 mounds, you get 360 degrees, which is the size of the Earth in Moira. Now, Moira is an Egyptian unit for the distance of 1 degree of Earth. Now, what we say is that our modern usage is a nautical mile is 1/60th of a degree. So there's 60 nautical miles in a degree. So if you multiply 60 nautical miles times the 360 degrees, you get 21,600 nautical miles of circumference of the Earth. And we're saying that the size of the Earth is correctly encoded in this monument. Now, during this time, the Bronze Age, there were, if you've traveled in the British Isles, you've seen them, many of them. There were 1,000 stone circles built but during this Bronze Age, between 2500 and 1200 BC. And we are confident that that is because the Earth was understood to be round at that time. There was a paradigm shift in understanding of the world. And at 2000 BC, Stonehenge 3 was built, which we're convinced is it took 1,000 years to build Stonehenge. The last stage, the big stones in the middle, were put up 1,000 years later. They were put up at 2000 BC, and that's because of the discovery of the New World. That's in one of our, written up in one of our books. Stone spheres made out of big round rocks, found in Costa Rica and France and all around the world. And a lot of this emphasis on spheres is related to the Egyptians who were involved here, because Mot is the goddess of law and order in the universe, and she's the wheel of the law. So, this site, which was founded around 2,500 years BC, is 4,000 years before Columbus. That's a very hard number to get your head around. That's maybe the hardest thing in some of this prehistorical American studies, is that the times are so different because the United States is only 200 years old. And it's just the tail end of American history. You go to school, you think it's mostly American history, but it's not. It's only about 1/6 of what happened here on this continent.
That's a big drop right there, what he's saying, you know, like they don't really teach really a real American history. They start us off about 150, 200 years ago. And there's a whole history that they left out, right? All this ancient knowledge, all these ancient civilizations here in America. He just mentioned the spear balls in Costa Rica, how it's linked to the so-called Egyptians, and it's linked to the astronomical alignments and all that, just like here in Pottery Point.
Now, Pottery Point, back to our travelogue again. This is the kind of foods that were available at this site and why there was such a large population. These are some of the arrowheads and points and drills, perforators and things. Over on the right are plummets. There were so many plummets found here that if you have plummets in your Indian collection, they may well have come from this site because they've been picked up out of these farming rows on this site for 100 years and been sold at rock shows for 100 years. This is very interesting. Ford, who was the archaeologist that did work here in 55, says that they found no grooved axes. Now look at all these, what you'd call celts. Now, if you're a collector, you've probably got celts, because in the United States sites you find celts, but you also find a lot of grooved axes. That is, there's full groove axes that go all around. There's I have collections of these, and I'm sure many of you do. These you can probably not do archaeology in an American native site without finding grooved axes. This is remarkable. This ought to be followed up by somebody because he's observed no grooved axes. That's remarkable because they're all over North America. Now in Europe, there are no grooved axes. There's some celts like this.
You hear them? This should be followed up on. They're found all over South America, and you ain't finding none of this in Europe. He just said that. The type of material they're using, right? Sophistication of these spear points, right? Oh, wow.
But you don't find grooved axes in Europe. This site is behaving European and has no grooved axes. It's astonishing. Now, maybe he just didn't, it's so little excavated, maybe he just didn't find it. But I'm saying that this had a lot of European involvement. There ought to be, but why can't there be? It was occupied 3,000 years. Why? This site was a very long time. Why aren't there grooved axes there? I don't know. I can't explain it. The Ford report describes 33 types of archaic points. That's what the archaeologists mostly got into. They're all archaic types. Most of these plummets were hematite, a third of them magnetite, 1 copper. Considering they've been collected and sold to collectors for 50 years, it's clear the material was brought here by boatloads. That's the archaeologist. Here's some of the tons of some of the exotic rock that's found. It was found in different parts of the site. Some parts of these rows had one color white rock they're making paint out of. Another one had a different kind of rock they're making points out of. In other words, this is an industrial site with division of labor. It's not supposed to occur at this date. Millions of items left on the ground. 100 tons of exotic rock was brought to this site. What is going on here that they would bring 100 tons of exotic rock from all over North America?
All right, you guys hear that? Millions of items, millions. What is going on in Pottery Point? We're talking about an ancient people, ancient site.
It's an important site. Now, this is archaic. There's not pottery. So what's found here are, they estimate 24 million PPOs made at this site. PPOs, or Pottery Point objects, are these little clay balls. And the reason the clay balls, some of them are little effigies, some of them are odd shapes like these. Some of them are just simpler. Here they are sorting out the different kinds on some tables. The reason is because they're cooking in steatite bowls. My grandmother had one of these soapstone kitchen sinks, an inch thick. You can't heat soup in a steatite, right? They're an inch thick. So they'd heat these poverty point objects and put them in the soup. That's how they were cooking here. This is a Ford found 32 pieces of pottery and 3,000 steatite bowls. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of things that are kind of interesting that don't fit what I've been saying very well. This is laying on its side. It's a pot laying on its side. This is the gravel it's laying on. It's in the museum there at Poverty Point. Now, what I want you to see is the grooves up and down here, how this has a pattern going around it and how it's made. And there are a horizontal band here and a horizontal band at the bottom. And there's little markings around the top, chip, 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 chip. Okay? This is just laying there. This was found on the site. Now, this is the one we just looked at close up. And this is the critical, if I walk a little closer, it darkens the slide a little bit. This is in the Devizes Museum. This is south of Avebury in England. A pot that you could exchange for that one and not know the difference. You can see the scratch marks are the same, multiple V-shaped scratch marks going all around the bowl. And there's also horizontal, if you can see it a little better, there's horizontal lines, top and bottom, just like the other one, and little divisions around the edge, just like above. Now, this is a reconstructed poverty point out of some parts. And these are pots in the Salisbury and South Wiltshire Museum, also in England. This is all called what's called beaker pottery. And the beaker people are the people that made these beakers. These are rare, kind of rare pots, but these two museums have pretty nice collections. These beaker people are thought to be the megalithic people that built many of the megalithic monuments during the Bronze Age in Europe.
So guys, what he's saying right now, which is pretty deep, so he's showing you the comparison of these potteries, right? They're exactly almost the same. They got the same designs. Again, some are found here in Louisiana and the others are in England. Talking about the bell beaker culture, right? The bell beaker culture, also known as the bell beaker complex or bell beaker phenomenon, is an archaeological culture named after the inverted bell beaker drinking vessel used at the very beginning of the European Bronze Age, arising from around 2800 BC. The bell beaker culture lasted in Britain from 2450 BC with the appearance of single burial graves until as late as 1800 BC, but in continental Europe only until 2000 BC, when it was succeeded by the Unetite culture. All right, so that's deep. He's letting you know something here really deep. And where did they get all that stuff? Who was the real beaker? The bell beaker culture, could they have been coming from the Americas, these people? The knowledge definitely seems to, I mean, the copper definitely was, you know, that started this whole called Bronze Age. So who were these beaker or bell beaker people, right? So I hope the audio, I mean, I tried to fix the audio on the presentation. It was a lot worse. Like he was sounding like he was in a hall. So I tried to like fix the audio a little bit. Hopefully you guys can make out what he's saying.
And what is this doing here? This is another thing that's on exhibit in the museum. Oh, by the way, those pots ought to be studied with clay analysis to find out where they came from. That can be technically done these days. This pot is in the museum, and I asked the archaeologists about it, and this is a Caddo pot, which is a culture that occurred after Poverty Point. It was the Indians that lived in the area afterward. And it's in the museum because it's apparently found there, but it's known to be a later pot. And this pot, with a similar design on it, is from the Heraclean Museum in Crete. Okay. This book on the art of the ancient Caddo is quite interesting. It's an excellent book, privately published in Texas by a guy that owns a string of pawn shops. This is where the Caddo people used to live. Here's the site. Poverty Point with northeast Louisiana down here with the red dot. These Caddo people lived in the area. They were very nice to white men, and so they're extinct now. Unfortunately, those two.
He's talking about the Caddo or Caddo people, as he's calling them, and he was just comparing some of the vases they found in Crete with this one, and he got to dodge the hijack. He just said they went extinct, but guys, you're still here. All right, you're still here.
Things kind of fit together. But these are the dating for the Caddo, 400 AD, running down to 1500 AD. So we're looking at the turn of between AD and BC, and down here is Columbus, 1492 sailed. Okay, so these people were in the area of Poverty Point after Poverty Point declined and was no longer a copper trading center, and the arrival of Columbus. This is a Caddo pot. If anybody's been to Crete, or to Malta, Malta, Gozo, actually, go little Gozo Island, you'll see a lot of patterns like this on the Gajantia monuments and so on in Malta.
All right, so he said this is Caddo or Caddo pottery pot, which resembles almost exactly like what they're finding in Malta and Crete. All right. Now this is big because if you start looking into the legends and history of Malta and the Cretes, the ancient people there's a link to so-called Atlantis, right? With these people, we already know what's up with Atlantis, right? So that's what I'm trying to tell you guys. Like they the history of ancient America has been, downplayed, the role it played around the world. I mean, look at this design. Look at this from the Caddo people, right? And they're finding the exact same replicas buried over there in Crete and Malta. So who are those people over there that went, that did all this pottery? Are they connected to the ancient Americans? Most likely, their whole legend and stories is, they don't know where they originated. They try to give, conjectures and suggestions, but they also link them to possibly Atlanteans coming from Atlantis.
This is amazing to see this on a Caddo pot. This looks like a European pot. That's a Caddo pot also. This is the most amazing pot of all. This is a Caddo pot. It's got the typical Caddo top, and it's got these rings. From our studies, we know that these rings were the technology of the time. These are each 1 moira apart, or 1 degree of distance apart. This happens to be one of the 23 highly decorated panels in the Tumulus of Gavrinus in the Gulf of Morbihan, on the coast of France. It's the most decorated tomb in the world, right in the Gulf of Morbihan. And these are showing where the people were exploring on the water. They found the Azores trying to cross the ocean. A lot of them drowned. It was hard to know. The trade wind patterns of the ocean weren't known, but they did find the Azores out there, which is kind of amazing, kind of far offshore. And this monument was to the discovery of those islands, because that was the western home of the sun god for 1,000 years, as far west as was known on Earth. These people didn't know what was on the backside, okay? And they're trying to discover it during the Bronze Age. So this is the technology of the time. They could read the latitudes and knew how far they were sailing, and they didn't know how to read the longitude, but they just knew that they sailed that far or this far. It didn't matter. So they used the same pattern for 1 degree of distance in both directions.
All right, same patterns and the pottery found in the Azores and the Madeira Islands, Canary Islands. Again, all connected so-called Atlantis, right? Ancient America. I mean, it just got to be logical, right? How many more things we got to showing this is the true old world, right? Where all these people get these ideas, and we're finding it here in ancient America.
Now, this is a pre-dynastic Egyptian pot. Now, the dynasty started at 3000 BC. So this is pre-dynastic. They had a substantial culture before the dictators took over in Egypt, is what I'm saying. And like is common in a lot of places. And This happens, I think that photo was taken in the small but very excellent Egyptian Museum in Munich when we were there recently. But, and you can see that, okay. You can also see them on the web because the University of Pennsylvania has another batch of these pre-dynastic Egyptian pots. So this shows that the pre-dynastic Egyptians were part of the worldwide megalithic culture prior to the pharaohs. Now, this, with a similar megalithic pattern on it, is a Caddo pot that I was just able to buy on the internet. The guy said he at once saw there was a guy that collected them down there and was a digger for all his life, sold his collection. He had about 4 or 5 pots that had these kind of lines on them.
So you guys hear that? He found this on the internet and bought it. Like somebody was selling it for 300 bucks. An ancient relic of the Caddo people. Like, that's not even right, man. You know, desecrating burials, mounds, destroying stuff, and then putting this on the black market. Then you could just Amazon it or go to Craigslist or something and buy it. But look at the patterns, what he was showing you earlier, the same ones they're finding in the Azores, Madeiras, Crete, Malta. All right? Yeah, there was a global trade. But that global trade had an origin and a center, is what we've been trying to tell you this whole time. All right? This ain't personal. If anybody's still trying to like debate that America's a true old world or that all these things couldn't have come out of here, then you know you're very new to the channel. You haven't done all the research we've shown, you know. So, you know, just sometimes you just gotta empty your cup and learn to relearn. You know, we're always learning new things, right?
So I'm saying that this megalithic culture was sailing here, and its designs on pottery was carried down by the Caddo people after the demise of Poverty Point. Now, I've been saying that people are crossing the ocean and what are they crossing the ocean for, so I have to step back a moment here and explain to you a little about copper. This is a scuba diver. This is a photograph on the Seaman Mineral Museum, one of the biggest mineral museums in the world in Houghton, Michigan, and that's copper sticking out, raw, pure, crystallized copper crystals sticking out of the bottom of Lake Superior. And here's another guy. Now this is called float copper. I'm sorry it's on the bottom of the lake. But when it's in the woods and laying around and scraped out by the glaciers, it looked like it was floating or laying on the land. And how could that be? See how it's coming up vertically here? That's because the lava bed, which was poured out of the earth billions of years ago, 5 billion year old earth, so maybe a billion or 2 years ago, this lava bed poured out like the Decca in India, just flowed out on the earth. The lake is now over it. But the lava beds show up at the Keweenaw Peninsula and at Isle Royale. And when the beds are on edge, so this is what it looks like in Google Earth. So you're looking at the lava bed edgewise. And just like in the bottom of the lake, the copper was sticking up edgewise because it crystallized in between these lava layers. Now the glaciers that came across here, the Laurentian glaciers, scraped all this. So they sluiced out all this copper and it was left laying around on the ground. But you could see where it was coming up in the veins. And these old timers made tens of thousands of pits. This happens to be on the shore. It was shiny. The copper was shiny on the shore, and they could just go right in on the shore of Isle Royale with these holes. But a lot of places, they'd drop a stone, they call it singing stones, they drop a piece of metal, go dung, hit the copper, and then they dig down 10 or 20 feet as far as they could go with the Bronze Age technology that was common in Europe and in America at the same time, which is fire setting technology, where they get a fire, crack the rocks, pour water on, crack the rocks, another fire, then take their rock hammers and beat it down and get the copper out. Okay? These tens of thousands of pits run all through this area on the top of the Keweenaw. This is what they look like today. There's Alex Fagatti, a friend of mine who runs a rock shop up there. He showed me out behind his place a lot of these. 1800s, America was electrified by mines on top of every mine in the 1800s. The Calumet mine and so on were put on top of old mines. because the old timers found they had 1,000 years they were mining the copper 1,000 years, and they found where it was. So the modern mines were all on top of these old mines. These were maybe 30 feet deep, but you got 20 feet of leaves in there now. And at the bottom of these, sometimes there's big pieces of copper sitting on oak logs that have been in an anaerobic environment for 2,000 years. The copper was brought to Hudson Bay, it was brought down to the Kennebec through various routes to the north, because the lakes changed during a 1,000-year period of the mining, the lakes changed their height quite a lot. And for a long period of time, you was able to flow out of Chicago through the Chicago River. This sacrifice stone where liquids in the top of it come out of his mouth was located. There was one of these on each side of the Chicago River here at the outlet. This copper went down. Now here's Poverty Point. There's the Poverty Point site. There's some of the mounds at Poverty Point. And we're going to talk. Here's where the Mississippi comes out. There's the Pearl River comes down here between Louisiana and Mississippi. We're going to talk about the mouth of the Pearl River is another important site. These are the sites back to Europe. I won't belabor this, but we've studied in my books, we've studied all these yellow sites, and we know that there's latitude encodings in all the sites, and so we know that the northern route was past the 60-degree point of Cape Farvel and down, and there's also the easy route from the Cape Verde Islands that Columbus used later.
All right, so looking at this graph, they're not showing the currents, but remember what we've learned, the Gulf Stream current and many others coming out of the Americas is a lot stronger. You got the winds on your back as well, more favorable. It's 4 times harder to come from the other side of the world. If anybody was ever to cross the Atlantic, I'm going to keep repeating this. This is confirmed by a renowned navigational historian that it had to have been an American Indian who crossed the Atlantic first, And even if it was by mistake or voluntarily, because of the currents will easily bring you over to that side. And then again, remember the beans and the food that are ending up in the British Isles and Norway, Denmark, and all these places, and Madeiras and the Iberian Peninsula, American foods that somehow developed and planted themselves there, and now grow there locally on the coast, So wood and petrified wood or wet wood that was flowing there that people in the coast were grabbing and building their houses out of. I mean, we read this already, coming from the Americas.
This was a result of learning the trade route, the trade winds. They'd come up the coast to the big megalithic site at Mystery Hill, which was on the waterfront at the time, sail out here to 47 degrees at Cape Race. And then they just had to cross the Gulf Stream, which is running up the coast and over toward Britain here. They just had to cross the Gulf Stream down to the West Azores, and they're kind of home free. So this was the round trip of the Atlantic that we believe was possible in 2500 BC. There were earlier culture bringers, but they couldn't get back, we don't think. All right. In Copper Harbor, which is the north end of the tip of the Keweenaw Peninsula, recently this has been found. This is about 2 feet wide. We believe it's a Minoan ship. It's got bird head, big curved bird head things at both ends. It's got probably a boom at the bottom as well as the top of the sail. A little crow's nest at the top for going up and down the rivers. This is a wonderful find.
So, going back to that image of the ship, we read, that's just one. Like we showed in Gloria Farley's book, In Plain Sight, there's a whole chapter we read about all the different inscriptions of large ships, they found all over the Americas, most likely in times where you can travel, the rivers were bigger, or they had canals, as we read yesterday, big wide canals which large ships can travel through. And they're calling it Minoan, right? Phoenician, Minoan. They're trying to say, oh, they came from the other side. Again, they're seeing that in reverse. A lot of those so-called Viking or Phoenician or Minoan ships are just huge canoes, literally, from large trees. When you come to see, when you know the large trees where they're from, where they're coming from. Noah, Noah built his out of gopher wood, only grows in Florida, Georgia, and South America. So, dodge the hijack when he's saying, oh, Minoan, Minoan. That's what they're labeling it, because that's where they want to pick up history on that side. But, all right, where's that? That's the wood for that ship really coming from. And these inscriptions are from people over here, not anybody coming, oh, we're going to draw a ship. We're going to draw a ship here. Those were the local people doing that and heading out from here into the world trade.
This was a Minoan pendant found with a metal detector in a high school track that was being built up with mud that had been dredged out of the Ohio River.
Sorry, they found this so-called Minoan pendant in the Ohio River. You heard them? They're labeling it Minoan. That's what they're labeling. It doesn't mean it actually came from the other side or from so-called Minoans. They might be seeing it in reverse. Who's the Minoans? These people are, and when you see the wall paintings and stuff, like copper colored. So-called red. Red man. Who's the red? Who's Eric the Red? Red man. Yeah, so again, this is something I hadn't even known about, but how many things that we're finding here that's supposed to be from the old world, right? Not supposed to be found here. This is the stuff they don't teach us. They never showed us any of this stuff growing up in our history classes. The teachers don't even know about this because they got to follow a curriculum. When you start asking them, they're like, oh, I don't know. I never heard of that.
Pendant broke out by some, was lost by some guy. This thing's got Minoan axes on one side. Anybody think this is an Indian artifact? This is the backside. This is a genuine piece of
Look at that.
Minoan bronze.
Look at that.
Of Minoan traders that were taking copper from Isle Royale down to Poverty Point.
So dodge the hijack. Minoan, 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 Minoan. That's from here. They found it here. They found it here. Stop conjecturing. Stop making up things. With much respect, Jay.
This is kind of interesting. That's my hand. It's on the cover of one of Wayne's magazines. This is a hand that the fingers were an inch or two longer than mine. They're in the Hopewell graves. There's a lot of 7 and 8 foot skeletons. They're common. They're down in the Nevada at the cave down there. They found all these huge skeletons that were dug up by the University of California and so on. I don't know whether the big people were the sailors or the miners or just along for the ride, or it was one guy, or they're all this size. Nobody knows. All we know is we find big skeletons. They were apparently the rulers of the Hopewell, and they had, some of them were big skeletons, and here's a big hand. Now at Poverty Point, did copper really go to Poverty Point? Well, one of the archaeologists says he found surface copper, or just traces of copper on the dirt. Well, you're not supposed to, in Mississippi mud, found metals. Metals go to the bottom, as you know. So that's sort of out of place. Well, but now these fellows have been doing magnetic gradiometry, and metals show up as the dark stuff. So yes, there's evidence that scientific evidence that metals were passing through Poverty Point. And there's also a lot of round features. They've brought a lot of students out to study the round features. The Caddo people are famous for great big round houses later. This is all right, so we're talking copper that came from Michigan.
Again, he just said it. So again, don't get lost. They're showing these Egyptian drawings and all that. They're showing them carrying or, trading copper, whatever they're doing. He just said it. Remember, we're talking about copper that came from Michigan. All right? And who's the so-called Egyptians anyway? We're talking about the ancient Egyptians. We're not talking about the drawings they got on walls over there telling or retelling a story. We're talking about the actual people. Right? We're here in the Americas. The ancient Tamari, Tamarians, Tamers, right? Even from their own books, they called it Tamari. Their own Book of the Dead and all that, right? The civilized land, the beloved land.
It was unique in the world to find crystallized copper like that in those quantities that were up there. It was an unusual event.
the most unique copper, the most purest copper in the world, all right? Coming out of the Americas. It's what they used to create their so-called Bronze Age.
Be scraped out of the lava bed and then laying on the ground like that. It was a real gift to mankind, taking mankind from the Stone Age to the modern world. And while 500 million pounds is estimated to have disappeared from Michigan by these miners over 1,000 years and tens of thousands of pits, Europe had the Bronze Age, same period, and tremendous explosion of bronze tools, and they have no idea where the copper came from. Okay? This is the best evidence in the world. This is the Uluburun ship, which sank off the coast of Turkey. The hull had 10 tons of copper oxides in the bottom. Now, oxhide.
So they found a shipwreck off the coast of Turkey, right, with Michigan copper. They know it's from Michigan. They don't teach us this stuff.
It's HIDES. That's different from IDES, which is when you combine oxygen with the copper, it makes an oxide. This is oxhide because it looks like what they call a flayed ox, where if you take the skin off an ox, you get the arms and the legs. Okay? They made them easy to carry. These are off of temple walls in Egypt. This one has an Atlantean Poseidon symbol on it. Some of them have the circle cross symbol stamped on them. This is what they look like underwater, and the geographic representation of it.
Amazing.
Now, no one I've never seen anyone ask the question of where did these copper oxides come from? Oxides, where did they come from? Where were they made? Copper was traded between Pharaoh. You know, you read things, they say that, these are 1 talent apiece. The Pharaoh gave 400 talents of copper to another ruler.
400 pounds of copper, right? They're saying. He's trying to tell you something here, guys. Like, this is right in their records. Of course, they're talking about ancient Americas, though. When we're talking about ancient Egypt, just picture it all happening here. That's why they have copper. They're talking about all this copper they're using to trade around the world. They're finding it in the Mediterranean Sea, right? There, it's Michigan copper. They know it's the same quality. They can do their scientific tests on it to say, oh yeah, this is actually just like the Michigan copper, one of the purest coppers in the world. So he's saying they reference that copper in their historical records, so-called Egypt, ancient Egypt, the pharaoh selling or trading copper. We're talking about Michigan American copper.
Well, where did these things come from? Nobody has asked the question as far as I know. But they've been studied a lot. These oxides are from the Uluburun ship. There were 425 of them, and the Gale group at Oxford studied like half of them, more than half, with lead isotope studies, which I think must have been very expensive. They were trying to prove and show that this copper all came from Cyprus, which is what the archaeologists still believe because they keep reading these Gale reports, these Oxford reports. But in Cyprus, the copper is not laying around on the ground in pure crystallized form. It's in an ore that is 15% concentration, requires smelting. The German group, the Hauptmanns, I've studied 100 references on this now and had an article in the magazine and so on. The Hauptmanns have shown that all of these oxides are what they call blister copper. They're full of bubbles. So the Hauptmann group has concluded that's a sample or a drill sample down through one of these oxides, and it shows a bunch of vacuoles in it. There's also little slag pieces. From that evidence, which is what they get out of all of them, they conclude that these were manufactured in some place that was where there were multiple pourings, because there's multiple layers in these things, oxides, multiple pourings over wood fires in a very moist environment somewhere on Earth. Okay? This happens to be a nodule that one of the ones in the ancient mines that had been was lying on some timbers. You can see it's very flaked with. They've been knocking all the copper off it they could with the stone hammers. So they had this junky copper. They were floating down the Mississippi. Now, and was made into oxides, and I'm going to show you where, at the mouth of the Pearl River. Now, this is an Egyptian ship, 2400 BC, that found the far land of Punt after a 3-year voyage in 2497 BC, 2500 BC. They were sailing these ships. And usually there's 23 sailors, you can count on them, because that's a holy latitude, far north as the sun goes. It's the latitude of 23 degrees north. So, and you can see ocean fish, pelagic fish here, lobsters and so on. They were ocean sailing, and we believe Punt was, Olmec land was Central America. This is another drawing of what would have been like to have been on an Egyptian ship. Not bad.
So this image says the Egyptians had a long history of trading and ocean travel. Yeah, ancient Egypt, remember, they're talking about ancient Americans, dating back to 3000 BC. Here, an ocean-going Egyptian ship around 1500 BC as drawn from a relief in the temple of El Bakri. So they're talking about drawings, right? And you know, again, these ships, these same drawings, inscriptions are found in the rock here in North America and all over the Americas. Again, we've showed the research by Gloria Farley. She found so many of them, right, all over the Americas, right? And again, if you look at the ship, that's made out of a large tree, I'm sorry. It's just one piece, you know, it's just like a huge canoe with sails. It's just a huge canoe with sails. Columbus himself wrote that when he came over here, he saw their canoes. So he called them canoes, right? That fit about 150 people to 200 people. You know, that's not just any little canoe. We're talking about a ship. You know, and he's even said they had sails. So, you know, picture all this going on here, coming out of here. Where's the true Mediterranean? Is that really the Gulf Coast of Mexico, the Gulf Coast?
I just have to put some boats in there, or somebody's going to say they didn't have boats.
I want to read this right here. It says Atacapas tunicas and the Chitimaca tribes had striking similarities with the Nile Valley languages, involving words one would associate with Egyptian trading communities. And that's from Barry Feld. You know, he's big on the whole. I think he's the director of the Epigraphical Society, right? I was just reading his book today. I'm trying to see if we should get back into it. He gets into a lot of the Celtic and seeing things in reverse, people bringing stuff over here, or Celtics coming over here and writing on the rocks over here and leaving the Ogum and all that. But apart from that, pretty good work by Barry Fell and Gloria Farley when it comes to the inscriptions they found here, all the old world inscriptions. And again, I mean, this is just even more, like, I bet you we start really getting into this study, you know, how many more similarities are there with the so-called Nile Valley languages? You know, this is ancient Egypt. You got to understand, shout out to UBTV. He got so many videos on that, right? Like how much more do you need? Go watch this whole series on that. America's Egypt.
This is some work Barry Feld did. I got it from Brissath, but these archaeologists Brissath, these are the areas where the Atapacas, Tunicas, and Chichimeca tribes lived around Poverty Point at later date. And Barry Feld looked at their languages and found that their languages involved words one would associate with Egyptian trading communities. All right, the wife and I had a little, she is wonderful to tolerate my rock hobby. And we took a trip together to. You
guys still there? Did we lose any connection? Sorry about that if we did. There we go.
And here we are in Hallstatt. Hallstatt's a town in Austria where the whole mountain of salt. It's up above Salzburg, Salt Town. Salt was the refrigeration technique of the ancient world. So salt was very valuable. These guys had the money. The Habsburgs reigned here for 400 years and controlled the salt. All right. So This is one grave. This fellow found people found this necropolis up here, and this is one grave. The pot's in one grave. I don't know where these copper pots were made, but I bet you that's Michigan copper. And with it, they found this little red pot. It's on exhibit. They said, that's for sure a Minoan pot. So a Minoan went by here.
So what he was showing right there, he's showing these copper relics, artifacts. They're supposedly found in so-called Egypt. The Egyptians themselves saying, oh, that's Minoan. Again, he just said earlier, right? The Minoans were coming here and drawing their ships and grabbing the copper from Michigan. So just put two and two together, guys. Again, this is the most purest copper in the world. That's what they have determined. And now he's talking about it contains salt, right? They were trading salt. It was just very interesting because when it comes to salt, you know, a lot of the so-called Cape Verdeans, you know, they were trading salt. They're getting the salt and going all around the world. And one of their islands has literally called Sal. And what I'm trying to say is the American Indians were going over there since ancient times. They were the ones whaling. They taught Europeans how to whale. The Cape Verdeans ended up being whalers, right? So there's a little connection there, and with the salt trade and the Cape Verdeans and American Indians is what I'm saying. And hey, if you're new to my channel and you come in here just to like spam the chat, and like we know the context and background behind words. You don't, you know, we hip. Don't, you know, you're not teaching anything anybody else. We know why it's being called Hebrew. We know the whole context behind it. All right. And we're talking about a mother tongue. All right. We're talking about a mother tongue. Right. And we know certain terms are Greek, so-called Greek. You know, Greek is not even a real nation. You know, let's start there. All right.
I have a different interpretation. The Minoans were known throughout the world as the traders of copper. So these guys came up and sold one of their own little clay pots. Along with these pots they probably manufactured on Crete out of Michigan copper from oxides of blister copper. This was another use in the old world of copper. They say there were 1,000 of these made. These weigh, you know, many, many, many tons. This is the French Nautical Maritime Museum in Paris, one of the best things in the museum. There's only been about 2 of these found. But these were mounted on the front of ships. This is the ramming bar on the front of the ancient ships. And these things take a lot of copper. Where did they get all this copper? Well, it disappeared in Michigan.
So you guys saw that copper, pure copper. That's from a ancient European ship, Mediterranean. That was from Michigan. All right. And again, we know Egypt is supposed to be a so-called Greek term for Temple of Ptah. All right. Like we know the whole context. You're not coming here teaching anybody anything. Like, but I get your enthusiasm, right? I get your enthusiasm. If you would just catch up to my videos, you'll see how long we've been doing this and all the stuff we've shown. All right. Also, so obviously I haven't studied ancient Kemet. You know, get out of my channel, man. Kemet, you're talking about words. You see how this is what I'm saying. I'm sorry to interrupt, guys. When you're talking about Kemet, Kemet means rich, fertile, black soil. It doesn't mean a landmass or location in Africa. We have plenty of rich, fertile, black soil. Yeah, he gone. I already blocked him. He's probably gonna, if he's immature, he might create another account and come spam the chat again. Hopefully he's mature enough not to do that and humble enough to be able to just listen sometimes and don't come interrupt people's life, you know, and then spam the chat. Like, there's no need for that, man. Find some love, man. Chill, relax, man. Let's go.
Now, Poverty Point was supposedly, I showed you initially on the first slide, Poverty Point ran from 2400 BC when it was founded. Most of the mounds got built around 1500 BC. It ended 1200. The river moved away. Archaeology says that it ended at 700. However, this is a Burroughs Cave stone. And it's interesting. Some people call these stones fake, but there's stuff on these stones that can't be reproduced by anybody. Because here's a guy making a map of the Mississippi River. We have about 24 of these map stones. Here's a fellow mapping how to get up to the cave, and these are all dated, 1st century AD or so. This is all AD stuff. And a fellow has marked 2-story building on the side of the stone. This is the actual stone. I think I've got a close-up here. That's the actual stone, as good a photograph as I could make. This is Beverly Mosley's drawing of it. But at this, we know that by the 1st century AD, because the river moved away from Poverty Point at 1000 BC. So 1,000 years, this is almost 1,000 years after the river moved away from this site. Now, I've got a wooden apartment building. I know I have to maintain it all the time. But this place is several stories tall. There's no stone there at Poverty Point. So this is a wooden building. Somebody's out there maintaining a wooden building. And the access to it is known to be a trail from the mouth of the Arkansas River. 1,000 years after this river moved away from the site, it was still being occupied. And I think it had the reputation of being a copper place because this is embossed on some of the copper ingots. A lot of people call this the sun god symbol. It's the circle cross. It's very common, but I've seen it stamped in one of those copper oxides. This is Lake Okeechobee up the river. This is how many days it takes to get up to the very.
So he's mentioning about Burroughs Cave, right? Another location, Mr. Hubbard, he made it very famous. We got videos on that, all the stuff they found in the Burroughs Cave and other places near that location and Little Egypt, right? Illinois. So-called Egypt. Let's just be politically correct for Mr. Troll. So-called. And so yeah, check out the info on Burroughs Cave if you have no idea. They hid all these. They say these are all hoaxes and stuff. He's showing you what's engraved in these. There's a ship there in the water. I mean, look there's like a temple, a palace there, and you could also see the circle with the X. I mean, we got videos on this. In ancient Egyptian, so-called Egyptian, right, records. It just means civilized land. It's the civilized land, and I mean that's the same mark or tav. It's deep. Go check out the videos if you're new to the channel.
Probably. Okay. Not only that, but this is another stone. This is another Burroughs Cave stone. It's 24 pounds heavy. It's the biggest one I've got. And look at this. The guy heard that there were 2-story buildings in a town out there, but it's not next to the river anymore, of course. So he put it on the wrong side of the river, but that's a 2-story building on the wrong side of the river. There's nothing over there except Poverty Point, which is supposed to be on the other side right over here. So this is some evidence that Poverty Point was occupied longer than it's been thought. Okay. Now these are Burroughs Cave stones, just to show you that these are the kind of boats they were using. We have many, 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 many stones with boats on them. This is just a couple of them to show you a couple of the boats. Okay.
Again, and we've shown the actual pictures of the actual rock inscription of these. They found these in North America, inscribed on the rock, guys. Look at it. Shout out again to Gloria Farley. I got the book right next to me in plain sight. Huge book. We're gonna get right back into it. I think we got to go to chapter 5 or 6 next, so we're gonna get into that soon again. It's because I got to scan it, one by one, every page, because it's a physical book. But this is what they're finding here, guys, in the rock inscribed. And just because you find something like this doesn't mean that people from a foreign land came and drew it on the rock here. Why are you thinking so? Why are you conjecturing when you could just be more logical that the actual people from here drew it?
Now we're getting down toward the end. I hope I'm not being cut off here. I've been maybe going on a little longer than I should. The river piles dirt. The dirt accumulates, the mud accumulates at the mouth of the Mississippi River. Right now it's here. You can see it one time it came out here, one time it came out there. At 3000 BC, they say the river was coming out here, close to this Pearl River site. Now, if you're before the river was dammed up and leveed and everything, the Mississippi River had big flood seasons when it would have logs and flood over a bunch of states, kind of like the Nile, you know. And then it would have seasons where you could canoe against it, when there wouldn't be any current. So it varied a lot. But if you're coming in a small boat to pick up copper, you're going to want fresh water. You're going to want to wash. You're going to want to, your crew needs a rest. You want food. And you can't, this Gulf Coast is very, very shallow. The waves start way out there. And it's a very dangerous shore for a sailing boat. So you'd want to come in where it was deep by the current of the river, would make a channel for your boat to come in. Now there's two rivers here. There's the Mississippi coming out here, and here's the Pearl. Okay? And those created little deep channels you could sail into and get close to Poverty Point. But maybe because of all the current, you couldn't get up to Poverty Point or whatever. But there's two very ancient sites here that date the same as Poverty Point. 2000 BC is the founding of these sites. Cedar Land and Claiborne. Claiborne is a farmer, and I'm not sure Cedar Land is just another name for it. At any rate, this is one of the country's biggest swamps now. I took the swamp tour up here for the alligators and everything, but the wood would have been coming down this river. So this site, close to the waterway, close to the Atlantic, had fresh water, endless amounts of wood. So what do we find there? There are two semicircular settlement horseshoes, okay, above the marsh. This is the archaeology report by Bruce F. One of them, Cedar Land, here on the left, was occupied before 2000 BC. It didn't seem to have any planning at all. There's a huge reuse of clay-lined basin-shaped hearths. There's no effigy forms, no magnetite or hematite used, and the drills are 3 or 4-sided, kind of like some of the early Danish drills. Okay, Claiborne, on the other hand, has a conical earthen mound, kind of like you see in the Canaries. It was occupied at about the same time. Had a structured village in the middle of it with this conical mound. It has effigy forms. It has huge hearths. They're not clay-lined. It had magnetite and hematite bifacial drills, not 3 and 4-sided. So and these sites are totally different from what you find in the Indian villages up the Pearl River. So the conclusion of the archaeologist is that these were occupied by very different languages, different people, and they were foreigners from the United States. It's interesting that in the Bahamas they're finding underwater now mooring areas that are side by side, different ones. So apparently the different cultures were kind of side by side and had their own places in multiple spots. I don't know, I can't tell you if one's Minoans or one's Atlanteans or one's Egyptians or what. We're not there yet, but we're studying this and we're making some progress. Now these sites had hearths 6 feet deep. This is charcoal 6 feet deep that ran 300 feet long, long like football fields. And in the hearths, in the carbon, were numerous amorphous clay clumps commonly found. Typical cluster were 86 clay objects that they can't identify what in the world they were. They're just hardened clay. And they carbon dated here, 1425. They call them activity areas. The artifact types were exclusively fragmented baked clay objects. They're interpreted to represent specimens that fragmented during the firing process. And predominant artifacts included cobbles with battered ends. So there's stone axes in there. And what they're doing, the archaeologist didn't recognize what he was describing, but he described it beautifully. When they were pouring in this very moist environment with wet wood on the Gulf Coast, and maybe they're hot and they're sweating, they're getting a lot of moisture into this multiple pouring of this Michigan copper and making these oxides here. This is the world's factory for bronze, for the Bronze Age. And when these things cooled, they used those battered stone hammers to break these clay pieces off of the oxides. It's just beautiful. He described an absolutely beautiful thing and didn't know what it was. I've sent it to him and asked him for documentation because a lot of people down around these sites have big collections in their basement of these objects, and they don't know what they are. What were they making? Why is all these clay pieces here broken? Why are they making thousands of them? Why are they 6 feet deep? Why do they run the lengths of football fields when there's nothing, no product made out of clay? Okay, it's fabulous. Here's the waterway coming up, and this is the first high ground from the Gulf, and it's green, it's vegetated. The rest of this is marsh. The sites were right here. Here's now an industrial park on it because it's also valuable as an industrial park. It's the first high ground. This waterway is the waterway which these ancient sailors sailed through. But the archaeology is being paid for by NASA. Oh, here we are. We found some of these PPOs, or the cooking objects. This is where the remaining part of the site where archaeology can still be done. It's covered by some. The archaeologists, before they put the industrial park in, which was thought to destroy everything, they took some broken concrete and covered up part of this site. So part of the site is preserved. This is the part that's preserved along the left bank here. This is upriver, about 1 mile. This is called Propellant Avenue. And there's a set of locks from that bayou. And huge barges go up there with tanks of hydrogen as big as this room. And they tie them up on the side of Propellant Avenue here. They also bring in every rocket that's ever been sent by America to space has been here. And this is what they do on the site. They fire them and test fire them. So that this little waterway in the marsh has, if you were to sit there at that marsh and look out at the waterway, you see every rocket that's gone to space go through that waterway. And if you were there earlier, you would see every bit of copper that supplied the oxides for the Bronze Age in Europe going by you in front of you. So this little waterway in the marsh is an absolutely remarkable place. I didn't know all that until I went down there. All right, this is the end. Poverty Point has an out-of-date, out-of-context, archaic date because it was founded 4,000 years before Columbus. It's a hunter-gatherer town, but it has mounds which are supposed to be woodland, occur thousands of years later. It has divisions of manufacturing labor, which aren't supposed to exist at this date. It has no agriculture and no woodland pottery. It has out-of-context megalithic period design features. The site latitude is encoded, the Atlantic sailing latitudes are encoded, the size of the Earth is correct, and the Earth is modeled in the site design. So it's a megalithic period or Bronze Age period town or city, whatever. It had 100 outlier sites that provided food to this center. So it was a huge population center. It has, I find, out-of-context Minoan and beaker pottery was found there. There's out-of-context copper identified on the surface, and the gradiometry has hits for copper. There's out-of-place, enormous, the harborside level hearth complexes where, with huge amounts of unidentified baked clay mold fragments, where the oxides, I think, were manufactured. The place is still 99.7% unexcavated. It had circular design, conical pyramids, latitude encodings, multiculturalism, and pottery show that a Poverty Point was part of the worldwide megalithic culture, contemporary with Middle Kingdom pharaonic Egypt, the Olmec, the Minoans, the Indus Valley states of Babylonians, and the Shang. I conclude that this is where the world's supply of copper oxide ingots were manufactured and shipped. Poverty Point was one of the world's first industrial towns. Poverty Point continued to live after the river moved away, as shown by the maps, so that it was inhabited a total of 3,000 years. Foreign patterns in woodland Caddoan pots show that the foreign influence remained in Caddoan pottery, which was manufactured until they were obliterated after the arrival of Columbus.
All right. So that's one of the first industrial sites in the world. Again, in America. All right, before I go, I was going to show this video right here. I was going to add it to this presentation, but Uh, yeah, we got enough trolls coming in, and so we're gonna go ahead and also leave it here so it's not too long, so people can actually sit through it and actually click on it. A lot of people, they still tell me in the comments, oh, if it's more than 10 minutes, I'm not gonna watch it. If it's an hour long, I don't got time to watch an hour long, 2 hour long video. So, well, hopefully people can sit through an hour long video. So far we've been here, let's see, about an hour and 20 minutes. I'm gonna go ahead and recommend, if you guys, I did this about 2 years ago, this video right here, the people of Poverty Point, archaic civilization, mound builders, cooking clay balls, and trade. We were talking about the trade. All right, again, now we know this was also one of the oldest industrial zones or sites in the world, right? I put the link in the chat, all right, of this video, so you can go ahead and watch it right now if you like, or whenever you have time, or just go to search. You put Poverty Point, Kurimeo, it should pop up. That's what I just did right now, and it popped up. All right. So hold on. Appreciate everybody that came through today on the live chat. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed the little presentation. I mean, just more corroboration of what we've been learning about the Michigan copper, right? How it was sent all over the world. It was traded all over the world. The purest copper in the world. There's 500,000 tons of copper missing from these mines, these ancient mines they found in the Lake Superior regions and around all those lakes and that area in North America. Where did it all go? Where did it all go? Right? That's what they're asking. Where did it all go? Where did all this copper go, man? Where did all this copper go? Appreciate you guys tuning in. Hope you guys liked the little presentation. Shout out to Jay Wakefield. Thank you, Mr. Wakefield, for this presentation. And I think you're onto a lot, actually. Just gotta just see that it's been under your feet the whole time, the true old world. You just gotta, you're doing good with the research. You put it all together. He definitely knows it's actually Michigan copper that they're finding all over the world that created the Bronze Age. And he knows that it was brought down and the rivers were used as the highways for trading. And he's showing you the inscriptions of ships. I didn't know this was all in this presentation, things that we've already researched, right? Just corroborating with Gloria Farley, Barry Fell, and everybody else doing the ancient America research. But also, you see, he didn't add oh, this was done by a white race that came. And that doesn't mean we're looking down or saying bad things about people who are pale skinned. That's not what we're saying. We're just saying that like these authors like to generalize and just make it into one thing and just like leave out the local people, the local copper colored tribes of America. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. All right. Let me see what we got here. We're gonna go out with Dance of the Gypsies, Dance of the Gypsies. Again, I put the link in the chat of the video. Let me just highlight it. Hold on. I'm gonna pin it so people can find it. All right. That's the video that I made 2 years ago, Poverty Point. Go ahead and check it out. A lot of good info on that one too that he might have not mentioned. All right. If you haven't watched it, that's from 2 years ago. All right. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Blessings. And sometimes we just gotta be humble. We don't know it all. I don't know it all. Don't follow people blindly, not even me. Just verify the info. The research speaks for itself. I'm not trying to be cocky when I say go catch up on the videos and 1,000. I just really mean we put in a lot of work. We put in a lot of work over the years, trying to show you something that they never showed you in school. They never showed us these things. They never even kind of corroborated all these things or let us think about these things the way that we've been learning about them now. They told us history in reverse. There is a great history here in ancient America. It's been downplayed, and the world soon will know what I'm talking about. This will be mainstream one day, and you guys will remember that. Whether we're alive or not, It's gonna be mainstream. It's gonna be taught in the curriculums in school. All right, I truly believe it, and I know it will. All right, and a lot of the naysayers, a lot of the people doubting or just mad at me, they mad at me, or you mad at me, or Jake or Jay Wakefield. Who you mad at? Who you mad at? The authors I'm reading? I'm not. I didn't write none of these books. I'm just a messenger, and I'm just trying to put it all together for you in one platform, in one place, so you can go to it and research it yourself, follow it up if you like, add it to your studies. You just gotta be a little unbiased, be willing to empty your cup, relearn, and you'll see there's a true history. All these little pieces of the puzzle start building up. You see a wider picture. Okay, this is what I'm saying. This is what I kind of started doing as I started doing my personal research, and then I wanted to bring this to you guys. Shout out to everybody out there who's doing the same kind of research, all the YouTube channels, keep going. Appreciate everybody that helps out in the learning, in the teaching, all the educators, all the people who take their time to do this. Nobody really has to do this. I don't really have to do this, but it's a passion for a lot of us. A lot of you have skills in a certain thing. You have your profession, you have your trade, your skill, your job. This is what we do. Let us do what we do. We want to criticize. Well, I hope you got sources to criticize what we're showing. Not just words and complaints and opinions, right? But appreciate all the real ones who do appreciate what we do. Thank you very much for all the kind words, every time, the motivation to keep me going. Yeah, the blood calls out inside. Like sometimes we're just on automatic. We're on autopilot. That's what I'm kind of on autopilot. Hawa just manifests through all of us, right? Hawa just manifests through all of us, the Great Spirit. Yeah. Pura vida, mi gente. Pura vida. Hawa. Wow.